Chad Dixon, what are y'all's thoughts on vintage Rados as a poor man's option? Let me just say I love them. Rado, a young watch brand, it actually grew out of the Schlumpf Clock Company in the mid-1950s. A gentleman named Paul Luthi took the clock company, married into it. Nice way to acquire wealth.
Oh, yeah.
And in 1955, they launched their first watches. In the 60s, they came out with a couple of watches that are great. 1962, the Diastar. Awesome, tool metal case. Basically indestructible, and one of the first watches to feature a sapphire crystal. Billed as the scratch-proof watch, many of them have come close to that. They also released a dive model during the 60s called the Captain Cook, and vintage examples of that are great buys. If you want a 60s dive watch from the golden era that looks the business but doesn't cost a fortune, look for the first generation Captain Cooks. And then the first generation Rado Manhattans, really not just one of the first practical rectangular watches for daily wear, not fragile in any way, but with a case construction that enabled 200-meter water resistance even then. A lot of times, even today, you'll see those watches that have never been serviced, and as long as someone doesn't try to start it up, your watchmaker will open it up, and it'll be immaculate inside, not rust-stained, not water damaged. Look for a first-generation Rado Manhattan, a first-generation Captain Cook, one of the original Diastars.
Diastars, absolutely. And let's not forget, we need to give Rado credit for basically pioneering high-tech ceramic. It wasn't the J12,
no.
It wasn't,
it wasn't IWC.
It wasn't IWC, it was Rado.
And they did it, and Swatch Group doesn't like to admit this, but when you see things like the alternating brushed and polished finish on the bevels of the gray side of the moon, when you see Omega with plasma-etched, high-gloss ceramized surfaces, and Blancpain going in that direction too, all of that was pioneered at Rado, at their materials manufacturer. They don't make movements, but you better believe they make materials and cases, and they were the laboratory for the whole Swatch Group for exotic materials.
Absolutely. And I actually think I'm upset that they're not as popular as they should be as well. I think Rado...
I have a soft spot.
I mean, I know they're extremely popular in Asia. Did you know that the #1 selling watch brand in Pakistan and India is Rado?
I did not know that. I did not know that.
The reason I know that is because I used to get a lot of clients from those countries asking for Rado. And at Vempe, we didn't sell Rado, so I said no, and I tried to sell them something else. And they just wanted Rado. And then one day I just had to look it up after I lost my 20th sale. I looked it up, and yeah, they're statistically the #1 watch brand in India and Pakistan, luxury watch brand.
And it's worth mentioning that I guess they traveled a little bit, but during the 50s and 60s, it was the Far East Asian market, it was Taiwan, it was Japan, it was mainland China and Hong Kong that first lifted Rado to prominence and volume as a watch manufacturer, which is why a lot of the green horses, the golden horses, the purple horse models, if you want to buy them vintage, you have to repatriate them from East Asia.
You're right, and actually that's not a terrible thing, because if you've looked at the vintage watch market, particularly in Japan, the watches are kept immaculately. It's just, you never have to worry about having something that's not as advertised.
You don't have to worry about the watch coming out of grandma's junk drawer like you would in the United States.
Exactly.
So, rolling along, we had another question coming in at the same time as that question about vintage Rado. Andrew Piatek is asking, is there a way to go Swiss and stay away from Swatch and LVMH? Oh yeah, lead off.
Sure. Let's pretend he also wants to stay away from Richemont. Depends on the budget, but me, if I want to go independent, on the high end, FP Journe, is definitely a great way to go. If we want to go something a little bit more mid-market, you've got Corum, you've got Eterna, you've got Vulcain.
And he's left the door open to Tudor.
Tudor and Rolex. Yeah, I'm trying to go completely, independent.
We're going like cold turkey on any groups.
Breitling, of course. Well, maybe not for long.
Yeah,
but
we'll see.
Breitling. There's a few options out there.
I would say I don't consider PPR. I guess now it's called Kering.
Yes.
I don't consider Kering to be one of the major groups. So you can put Girard-Perregaux,
Ulysse
Nardin, recent Jean Richard watches in that category as well. And Girard-Perregaux gives you great value.
Oh, Girard-Perregaux gives you amazing value, especially in the United States. One thing I don't like about them is they invented the whole jewel craze. Like they made 80 jewel movements.
Okay, this is true.
They're to blame for that, but honestly, they make great in-house calibers. fantastically finished watches, and they can be had for a steal. Real hot horology, in my opinion, at least.
And this is absolutely true, and that is true of vintage as well, where if you want to get one of the HF movements, the chronometer grade high frequency movements from the 60s, get them before the vintage guys discover it. Get it before it appears on the front page of Hodinkee. Those watches right now are hot property lying vacant. Stake your claim.
Absolutely. And actually, if I could have any Gerard Perregaux, I'd probably have the World Time with the financial World Time watch.
A modern icon. That's Gerard Perregaux. You struggle to say this watch is clearly their icon, at least in design terms. But that complication, the WWTC Financial Time, the WWTC Family, I think World Time these days, I think Gerard Perregaux.
I think Gerard Perregaux, right along with Patek, if we're talking about that particular complication.
That's true. Patek, with obviously in the modern era, dating back to the 2597, World Time Patek, or excuse me, 2497 is a travel time watch, but dating back to the Louis Codier models, with the World Time reference ring, Patek does World Time. That's true.
Yeah, absolutely. But Gerard Perregaux, fantastic value.
Yeah, good stuff. Gerard Perregaux also, I would say if you're looking independent, FP Journe's great. I would also consider going with something along the lines of Audemars Piguet.
Audemars Piguet, even though I think their brand is very much Royal Oak based, which is great because you can get Jules Audemars for a great price. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go with another brand, which I can't believe I didn't think of right away. And they're a great value. I expect great things from them. And, to answer an earlier question, H. Moser.
Oh, yeah.
Edward Milan, the CEO of Moser, the young, early 30s, must be just a couple
and
years
continuing a
older than
great family tradition.
Continuing a great family tradition, taking on things like the iWatch and boycotting the Swiss-made label and, yes, things that can be misconstrued as media stunts.
But well done.
But well done.
You can put on a good freak show.
He's got the brass to kind of move forward and do some really cool stuff.
And Moser is a company that was founded in the mid 2000s, reviving an older brand. They're actually Schaffhausen's other watchmaker.
Exactly.
They have their own micro subsidiary called Precision Engineering that makes their small parts. They had Rolf Lang, father of Marco, and Andreas Streller doing a lot of the early engineering on the movements that got them started. Things like the double hairspring, things like the platform escapements that can be pulled out in one piece, the perpetual calendars that are probably the most elegant in the industry.
And you know what? Even if you go time only, if you go a gold time only Mayu, you can get those in 4 figures, which is hard to say.
Yeah, that's a remarkably boutique watch from their early days in the late 2000s.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, even now, they're on a stable financial footing. They're owned by MELB Holdings, that also owns Haute Lance and is run by the Meylan family, formerly corporate fathers of Audemars Piguet. But you're talking maybe 1,200 watches a year from Moser?
Oh, 1,200, maybe even less. Maybe, but would you say they probably make about the same amount of watches as Journe?
I would say probably a little bit more than Journe. Journe maybe about 900. Okay. Honestly, Moser, in the last few years, there was probably a year when they made 800, 900 movements, and 1,200 was like a goal. So I'd agree with Federico on that.